2. Okay, so Patzer's playground number 2. Again, names are changed to protect the innocent, so you guys can think it's me against myself. We're going to look at it from white's point of view. So we'll go through the opening. It was a Scandinavian. Pawn takes pawn, and black plays knight f6. White tries to hold on to his pawn with c4, and black makes it a gambit with e6. So white accepts the pawn. Okay, so already we have a bit of an imbalanced position. And so what's happening here? What does white have going for him at the moment? So white has an extra pawn. Good. And what does black have going for him? Black has development. Good. Okay. So this question's a little bit trickier, but which square might become a problem for white at the moment? There's a certain square that could potentially pose problems for white. You guys have an idea what that square might be? Very, very good, guys. Very good. Yeah, d4. So why d4? There's a specific reason. Why is this square a problem for white, potentially? Yeah, d3 is also correct, but there's a reason that d4. Right. So notice that white has lost his e-pawn, and white's c-pawn has moved forward 2 spaces. So no pawns are going to be able to control this square, and for the same reason this square. Right. So if black establishes full control over the square, it kind of hems in white's pieces, right? So for example, if black were allowed to eventually post up a knight on this square, then all of white's pieces would kind of be hemmed in. This bishop would kind of be blocked in. This bishop would kind of be blocked in, etc. Okay, so given that, what should white play here? Do you guys have any suggestions? So, to play the move d4 itself looks logical. But notice that white's actually behind in development because he has absolutely 0 pieces out. So we'd like to make a move where we can both develop a piece and control d4 at the same time. So do you guys see a move that can do both things? Very good. Very good. Yeah. So knight f3 would be definitely the best move here. Very simple, right? You guys all understand that knight f3 would be a good move for white? Just simply getting ready to complete his development, getting control over d4, and getting 1 step closer to castling. Okay. Let's see what white played. Okay, so how bad is this move? Is it kind of bad? Is it sort of bad? Is it really bad? It's pretty bad. No. This is Patzer's playground, Deadbird. We're going over games of not so strong players and trying to figure out what they do wrong. Yeah, h3 is almost even worse than a pass because you're actually weakening squares around your king. But it's a completely unnecessary move because there's no fear for bishop g4 after knight f3. I mean, it doesn't even threaten anything. And it would be wasting a move on black's part to do something like that. So yeah, this move is something you should avoid at all costs. This type of move that does nothing, especially when you're behind in development like you are in white's position here. So black played bishop c5. Makes sense. It furthers control over which square? d4. It's not close to being the worst move on the board, but it's probably in the bottom 50%. Okay. So, white plays knight f3 here. So let's ask ourselves a question. Let's say we're black here. Through the magic of the flip command, we can suddenly become black. What do we do here? We're down a pawn, but white has wasted some time with this move h3. So how do we kind of manage to equalize here? This is something that's very important. This is something that's very important. So you have to ask yourself, is white threatening something here? So is white threatening something here? And don't forget, when I say threat, I don't necessarily mean something that wins material necessarily. I could also mean a positional threat. Something that helps white consolidate his position. Because don't forget, white is up a pawn. So what is white threatening, if anything? Yeah, excellent, excellent. White is threatening this move d4. And again, the reason why this is a threat is it allows white's pieces freedom. It restricts this black bishop from attacking f2. So for example, a move like knight e4 may look attractive at first glance because, okay, we're attacking this f2 square and it's actually impossible to defend it straightforwardly. But we can play d4, and now we're gaining a tempo and getting ready to finish our development, and white is just better here. So knight e4 is a bit too overzealous. But okay, so we want to kind of stop d4, so how can we do that? So very good. As most of you guys have already mentioned, the move knight to c6 establishes full control over d4, and black would be equal. Okay, I'll show you guys why in a second, but I want to get to something else first, which is, can actually black play something else here other than knight c6? And this is a bit of a tactical exercise. But there's actually something else that black can play here. Do you guys maybe see what it is? So what if I told you that black can actually win a pawn back by force? Would you believe me? Well, it turns out he can, actually. And the way to do it is exactly how Popeye described the move queen e7. So this move actually wins a pawn back by force, because we're threatening bishop takes c4, check. And there's actually absolutely no move that prevents this. For example, if bishop e2, we can actually still play bishop takes c4, because again of the pin. Queen a4 doesn't help, we just play b5.
Check.
So other moves don't help. If d3, of course, we just take on c4, it's check. And if queen e2, don't forget we can still take on c4 after playing what? Magic. Not quite. But notice that this queen has now permanently blocked this bishop from ever escaping. So now, exactly, now we have knight c6 with ideas of knight b4 and knight c2, getting ready to queenside castle, getting ready to put our rook on e8. And now actually black's pressure is probably more than compensating the pawn, and white would probably do best to just jettison this pawn to try to get his pieces out. So this doesn't help. And let's just take a look quickly at what happens after knight c6. So let's say white tries to complete his development, bishop e2. And now we have a nice little cute forcing line, knight e4, threatening to take on f2. So white has no choice but to castle and defend that pawn. And now black has this cute move to exploit this pin, knight to g3. White plays rook to e1, only move to save the rook. And now, rather than taking this bishop on e2, which is quite a bad piece, black would just continue his development with the move queen to f6. And notice that all of white's pieces are pretty much huddled together on the back two rows, whereas black's pieces have full coordination. Black's going to, again, follow this up with probably queenside castling, get this rook on this d-file. Going to play rook to e8. And black would be perfectly fine here. In fact, better. So, let's take a look at what actually happened. Well, he castled. So, now white has a chance to play d4. But he doesn't again. He plays g4. Now, what's our opinion of this move? What is our opinion of this move? Yeah. I'm not entirely sure what it does. Yeah, premature would be a kind word to say. But in actuality, any sort of pawn thrust here is completely unfounded because no development, right? So again, let's put the shoe on the other foot and pretend we're black. Okay, through the magic of flipping, we can change it to black. Okay, now, your opponent just played g4. How do you win by force? How do you win by force? Yep. How do you win by force? Okay, pot pie is correct, rook e8. And then on d4. So notice that taking on c4 check allows bishop e3 when white is somehow holding on. And bishop takes g4 check also allows bishop e3. So yeah, very good, Zwish. Bishop e4 check.
Check.
So now all of a sudden we're trying to pin up white. So now if he moves any piece to d2, bishop takes c4 just wins everything. So he has to go knight c3. And now what? Now it looks really attractive to play some sort of check with this bishop. But in actuality, the strongest move here is to play knight to e4, hitting this guy. And notice that this queen cannot defend this knight. Because if, for example, queen c2, simply knight takes c3, and now we use this bishop to great effect with like a bishop f5 check. And we win the queen, because we're attacking this and we're attacking this. So, white's best here is actually to do bishop e3 and just try to block this file out. Sorry. Instead of queen c2, bishop e3. And then we go knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes.
Check.
And he has to block somehow. So blocks with a knight. And the best move here, just as one final quick little thing, is what? It's just a quick little tactical thing, but very good. Very good. So the best move is not this one, as you might think, but it's actually this one. Because it turns out that white's best is to just play bishop e2, and then we're going to take the rook the next move anyway. Because otherwise, if, for example, bishop takes d4, you have bishop takes g4 check, which wins everything. And we're also threatening some sort of bishop takes e3 and queen h4 idea as well. So, again, white's best is to just allow this rook to be taken at the end. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Let's go back to the game. Because black played this move h6. So now all of a sudden, what's going on? Black hasn't exactly punished white for his mistakes to this point. Yeah, so white was chasing ghosts and black saw the ghosts apparently and decided to stop them. So what should white do here? Well, it's the move he should have played probably the last 3 moves and played d4. Yeah, and now he's better again, somehow. Again, d4 is absolutely crucial because we can't let black control that square. But now he can finally start to develop his pieces. Maybe he can now play bishop e2, castle. Looks a little weird with his pawns pushed, but okay, I mean, at least he's getting his pieces out. Okay. But what does white do? Plays d3. So not quite the same. I guess he wanted to defend this pawn, so he could play bishop g2. But say we're black. What should we do here? Again, we should put our tactics hat on. And ask what's possible. So rook e8 makes a lot of sense, but there's actually something stronger. And again, it's based on a tactical motif. And the move to play is actually bishop takes c4. Because notice, this king becomes overworked. So, if pawn takes bishop, bishop takes f2.
Check.
And now the king is forced to leave the queen side. If king takes f2, queen takes queen, wins the queen. And if king e2, now we play rook e8.
Check.
And now again, the king is forced to either take the bishop, or if you block, I just keep taking whatever you block with. So, black could have done that, but he didn't. Played rook e8. which is a good move. Bishop b2, okay. He's finally closing up the e file. Knight c6. Okay. So what should white do here? He's probably worse. But what should he do here? Castling's a bit risky. It's not terrible, but actually something you can do that's better. And that's to develop. And a good way to develop would be to develop this knight. So knight c3 seems really logical. And after knight c3, white's probably only slightly worse. Even though he's up a pawn, black has a huge lead in development, but white's starting to close the gap. But white, of course, thinks he's motivated by attacking principles and plays this move, which looks very bad. So black moves his knight. And again, here white should again just develop rather than chasing anything. But he decides to take a pawn. Yeah, this was a long time control game. So now black brings his knight in. Capture, capture. Okay, threatening queen takes f2. So white defends with bishop e3. And now all of a sudden here black should take on b2 and hit the a rook, but instead he plays bishop b4.
Check.
I believe it was game in half hour. And suddenly after this move, knight to c3, suddenly white's better out of nowhere, because this guy's hanging, this guy's hanging. So black is forced to go into this variation where he captures on c3.
Check. Check.
Okay, now king f1 is best. Good. So here white's still better, somehow. Because notice how two of black's attacking pieces have been traded off. And what's left is that white's up a pawn, and actually now black's king is almost just as unsafe as white's king at the moment. This pawn on h6 is actually wreaked some havoc. But white still has to be careful. So g6. And now, what should white do here? Just take the knight. Good. Yeah. So taking a knight would be best. Taking the knight would be best. Don't forget, though, that this queen is defending this rook, so you can't actually take this pawn. But in this position, rook c1 would be good. And then depending on where black moves his queen, you can either take the pawn or play queen f3 and develop. But white plays the worst move on the board, rook to g1, and now he's completely lost. The question is, why? And it's actually not as simple as you think. So let's try to look. Why is this completely lost? And again, not as simple as you think. This is actually not tricky. I mean, sorry, it's actually tricky. If you guys see this variation, You just play bishop h3 and bishop g2. That's not completely winning. You're up the exchange, but you're down a pawn. That's not completely winning. So how is black completely winning? Yeah. So Ace-Rook has the right idea. Not sure if he sees what actually is happening, but yeah. Very good. Very good. So yeah. So bishop takes h3.
Check.
So let's walk through the variation. We'll see. Rook g2. And now this move knight to g3.
Check.
So the point is, if king g1, simply knight takes e2.
Check.
And you can't take this back because a1 hangs. So let's look at the more natural, okay, what happens if you take? This is the only other legal move on the board, right? Only king g1 and pawn takes knight are the only legal moves. So if pawn takes knight, now rook takes e3. And now notice this queen is overworked. Black's threat is simply to take on g2, take on e2, and take on a1. And that's surprisingly hard to stop. Rook c1 doesn't even help, because after rook c1, I still take here check, still take here check,
check,
and I take on c1. And the trick is I'm defending h6. So queen e5 would actually be mating on g7, except for the fact that I have queen takes h6. So that's kind of cute. Okay. But of course, this was very difficult to see, so black didn't see it.
Check.
And simply took the rook. Took back. Took the bishop. Took back. And now all of a sudden, it's an evenish endgame. But black is much better because this king is completely exposed. Okay, so black plays rook e8, which makes sense. And okay, here white is worse, but again, he's survived the worst. It's not completely hopeless yet. So he takes the knight, which is good.
Check.
And queen b2. Okay, so this is tricky now. This is tricky. So we're actually up a piece in this position. So do you guys know what the best move is here? There's no move that is winning. Because black is still better. But somehow Ace-Rook's first instinct was actually correct. King f3 is the best move. So the question is, why isn't bishop e2 the best move? It looks like we're saving our piece, right? We just took a piece, now we're saving it. So why isn't this the best move? So what's the variation? So let's look at it from black's perspective. Okay, but what's the line? I mean, rook takes e3 isn't the be-all and end-all. Because don't forget, if you're looking at a line like this, it doesn't work. Rook takes e3, king f2. If you want to do rook takes e2, queen takes e2, queen takes a1, this is actually not good for black because of queen e8 check and queen takes f7 check. And here I have at least a draw. So if you want to go into this line, that's not the right one. Rook takes e3 is correct, but after king f2, what do you play? And it's not rook takes e2. I mean, king f2 is forced. But yeah, queen d4 is best. Good. And now you're threatening discovered attacks. So here, king g2. And again, not rook takes e2 here, but rook e5. Threatening rook g5 check. So here, I have to play queen e1. And now queen e3 wins the bishop. And now I'm just up a pawn, soon to be 2, and a rook ending. But again, it's a little tricky. It's a little tricky. So let's go back to what white played, which is king f1. And again, black is better, but not winning quite yet.
Check.
So he plays queen f6 check. Block with queen f3. And now, what does black play? Well, of course, unfortunately, this queen was fulfilling a defensive obligation, and that was to this guy. And this guy is still threatening this guy. So queen takes rook does win the game.
Check.
And white resigns. So what did we learn from that game? We learned develop, and we learned develop, and we learned develop. So yeah, make sure that you develop your pieces. This this is what happens when you don't develop. All right, so this was an easier game. You guys ready for a more difficult game? Okay, here's a more difficult one now. And this time, our hero is black. So this time we're going to get a French. e4, e6, d4, d5. We got the advance. c5, c3, knight c6. It's all book. So far, so good. Knight f3. What does development mean? Good question. It means getting your pieces from their original squares to not the original square. So basically just getting your pieces out. So your pieces on your home squares have very limited mobility. But as you get your pieces out, they gain mobility. So by moving your pieces toward the center of the board, your pieces gain scope and they gain more influence over the board. Yeah. Getting pieces to influence the board, right? Because for example, this rook is influencing absolutely 2 squares. Sure. It's a good question. Yeah, so you want to get your pieces out of their starting squares as efficiently as possible. Okay, so let's go back to this opening. Okay, bishop d7 is a main move here. Looks a little silly, but it's theoretically accepted. Okay, now white plays this move bishop d3, which is also a theoretical move, but not the main move. Okay, so here, black plays c4. Now this move is a strategical mistake. Do you guys know why? Why is this move a strategical mistake? It's not a free pawn. This pawn defends it. Yeah. So most of the reason why the French defense can be successful is that you have tension on the center. Notice that white has this big pawn chain. But by playing this move c4, it looks like, okay, you're gaining space on the queen side, but in actuality, you're basically ensuring this pawn chain remains completely intact. So that's not a move you want to make. So what would be better would be to play pawn takes, and now what's a natural move here? For black. If you guys know the theory in this opening, you would know. But yeah, the natural move here is queen to b6. You're actually threatening to win a pawn here. It's a good square if your queen at eyes b2. And now white can actually do one of two things. So one thing white can do is actually play a pure pawn sacrifice here and play castle. So this line is probably just equal. So the point is like knight takes d4, knight takes d4, queen takes d4. And now you play this move knight to c3. And you can actually give a second pawn. But again, the point is white gets tons of development. And this is actually a line I used to play for white against the French back in the day. It's interesting. Black has to know what he's doing to combat this line, but black probably ends up with a slight edge at the end of this. So there's no need to really take the second pawn, but usually you can just retreat your queen and just develop your pieces and be okay. The other way white can play here, rather than castling, is to play a move like bishop c2. So defending this pawn a second time. And now black can go for the two bishops immediately with something like knight to b4. And now notice that if white wants to avoid the two bishops, he actually makes his position much worse. So for example, bishop b3, then black has a very strong bishop b5. And now white can't castle because the bishop controls f1 and knight d3 check is coming. So that's just an example of a way to play, but after c4, unfortunately, releasing this tension, now he never gets the opportunity to do any of that. Okay, so bishop c2, a5, so he's trying to get his queenside stuff going right away, which is not a bad idea, really. But again, development is going to be a bit of an issue, unless he kind of thinks about it in the very near future. What's up, guys? Hi to you guys who just came in recently. Okay, so white castle. Black's really gung-ho on the queen side. And again, it's not tragic in this position that black has not developed completely yet. Simply because, and this is important as well, the center is blocked. Remember in that last game we saw, the center was wide open due to the pawn sacrifice, and so development was crucial. Here, not nearly as vital simply because the pawn center is blocked, so it's going to be harder for white to develop some sort of major attack. But again, he will eventually have to think about this, and it'll become a factor in the game. So white plays b3, knight e7, a logical move to get developed. He doesn't want to play knight h6 necessarily, and allow a potential bishop takes h6. It would kind of ruin his pawn structure, make f6 weak. So knight e7 does make sense. Take, bishop a3, knight g6, bishop takes f8, and now king takes f8 is actually not terrible. But the move that black played is also okay. And he shouldn't necessarily be scared to lose the right to castle, because again, in a closed position, it doesn't matter as much. But he took with a knight, which is reasonable. Okay, knight a3. Okay. Now we get to the first question, and the question is: 1, what is white threatening? And 2, how do we stop it? So this is a more positional idea, but yeah, so notice that black has exchanged his dark square bishop off. So these squares are not feeling super cozy at the moment. So yeah, indeed, white is threatening this, and then if he can park a knight on d6, it'll be very strong, because it'll be unassailable, and it'll be very difficult to trade it off. So how do we stop this? This is very important. Yeah, this knight d6 is a dream outpost for the knight. So when you see these weak squares like that, you always want to try to get your pieces to those weak squares. So we kind of want to stop that threat while also doing something positive for our position. So the move I would like is to play rook b8. Why is that good? Well, it gets our rook on an open file, which is always good. It stops knight b5. And we're just getting ready to complete our development. So our next two moves are probably going to be knight g6 and kingside castling. And black really can't complain too much. But unfortunately for black, he played this move, knight to e7. And again, it's not a terrible mistake, but notice how he's slowly starting to cramp himself. So he was trying to reroute this knight to f5, but it's a bit slow. And it's entirely possible that this knight wants to be on a different square. There's no smother mate, no, but again, black is kind of making a concession. Okay, so white plays knight g5. And now what should black play here? Congratulations, Pot Pie. Okay, when you say knight g6, don't forget, there are actually two knights that can go to g6, so you have to specify which one. Knight fg6. Nope. The right move is actually knight f5. The reason is we want to gain a tempo on this knight and help complete our development. So by knight f5, we gain a tempo on this knight. Don't forget, our queen's attacking the knight. And we allow our room for this knight to go to g6. So if we play knight eg6, notice this knight is trapped. Has nowhere to go. But with knight f5, now after knight f3, now what does black do here? There's an important finesse here that black can play. Knight g6 is good, but there's something that black should play first. And that move is queen to e7. So again, developing, but again with a gain of tempo. Now notice we're threatening a3. So if you can develop with a gain of tempo, it's usually a very good idea to do so. And you know, the queen is not necessarily better placed on e7 than on d8, but at the very least it opens up our back row more so that when we do castle, we can maybe move our h-rook to b8 and keep our a-rook on a8. So looking out for small finesses like that can really help your chess, because they can ease your position if you're in a difficult position, or if you're in a better position, they can increase your advantage. Okay. But black played this move, knight eg6, unfortunately. And white doesn't want to play queen c1 is the point. Because notice that queen c1 actually keeps the queen on the back row and doesn't connect the rooks. Whereas queen e7 does connect black's rooks. So queen c1 is actually not a developing move. Because the queen's really no worse on d1 than it is on c1. But now notice this knight is stuck. So his knights are kind of tripping over each other. So white plays queen g4. Black plays queen e7. Okay. So now we're going to get to something very tricky. What should white play here? What should white play here? Notice that all of black's pieces are jumping over each other. This knight is stuck. This knight is stuck. Everything is kind of stuck on each other. So it's a bit of a unique situation. Like, really both knights are trapped. So how can white make use of the confusion in black's ranks? And again, this is something that's very advanced, so don't feel bad if you guys don't see it. Okay, queen f3 hangs a piece. So I can just take on g5 and then castle. But otherwise, you're right, I suppose. Sure, why not? I mean, also I can just play like rook a6. So queen f3, queen g5, knight c4, rook a6. Okay, so the key is actually and actually LC makes a great point. Yeah, a3 is hanging too. I guess you could take on f7, but I think that's fine. Okay, so anyway, the right answer is actually this move. Knight takes c4. So the point is, this is actually a positional sacrifice. Very deep, very tough to see. But the point is we want to get to knight to d6. And this actually forces a knight to d6. So, after take, knight e4, rook a6. So black is fully ready to take on d6. Okay? Black is fully ready to take on d6. But we just play rook b1. And now rook b8's coming. And now, like you guys said, f4, f5 is coming. And notice that black is actually almost in zugzwang here. He can't really move anything. We already established he can't move these guys. He can't move this guy. Can't really move this guy. This guy's covering this square. This guy has 2 legal moves. This queen is stuck. I mean, this is pathetic. But again, it's kind of like a long-termish thing. There's no like immediate benefit to it. But notice that white can improve his position pretty much at will. Whereas black, I don't even know what legal moves he makes after a while. Again, not something that's easy to see. So I wouldn't fault anybody for seeing it, for not seeing it rather. But it's just something to be aware of, these types of sacrifices. So okay, let's go back to the game. Okay. So white played knight b1. Yeah, Pacific, but I mean, black would do something to guard against it. Because it was black's move in that final position. Okay. So, black plays f5. Good move. Good move. Because he needs to get his pieces out somehow. So chasing the queen away and trying to release the tension a little bit is good. Okay, so black, I think white captures en passant. And now the question is how to recapture. So this is going to be the difference between being equal and being much worse. So how to recapture? Yeah, absolutely with the pawn. Absolutely with the pawn. Because notice how our pawns are kind of all connected now. We control this e5 square. We're threatening this knight on g5. We're going to evict it from its premises. We have thoughts of playing e5 with tempo on the queen, then getting our knight to e6. All of our pieces are suddenly getting active real fast. So pawn takes is pretty much obligatory here. And again, I think the game is about equal here. This center position is a little odd with his open e-file, but this e6 pawn is well defended. And if black can kind of mobilize these pawns in the center, he should be quite good here. Okay, but unfortunately, black recaptured with the queen. And now again, he's in some trouble. So f4. So white's just trying to break open the center, which makes a lot of sense. Because again, black's king is stuck in the center. And queenside castling again looks quite unattractive. This queenside's kind of barren. So what should black do here? Again, he's worse, but let's try to mitigate it a bit. And I can't say whose game this is, but if they're watching, they'll know. So we kind of need to do some sort of repositioning with these knights. Some sort of knight e7, knight fg6, and then castle. Because really the knights are in their wrong positions. So knight e7 is actually a good move, but we need to prepare it a little bit. So the move h6 first to chase this knight away. And then knight e7, knight fg6, and castle would be what black should do here. So he does need to reposition. But chasing this knight away first would be a good idea. Just, make it play knight f3. Okay. So, instead, black plays this move e5. Because you'd rather chase away the knight than the queen, Pacific. h5 just chases the queen away. Whereas h6 chases the knight away. The knight's more important than the queen is really doing as much as the knight is. So now black tries to lash out, attack the queen, but white sees through it, plays f5. Okay, so white's not threatening this. But you still have to move the knight, unfortunately. So knight e7 again is probably necessary. But black tried this move e4. And now do you guys see the finishing blow? Yeah, there's a variety of ways to do it. But yeah, you guys have the right idea. So something takes e4. Something takes e4. Knight takes e4 or bishop takes e4. Either one. Same difference, but the point is after the recapture, queen takes e4, and then this queen is forking the king and the rook. So that's exactly what white did. He did it with the knight. Bishop takes was also exact same thing. Take, check, and GG. So In this game, also development played a role, did it not? It wasn't as stark an example as the first game, but again, the fact that Black's pieces were kind of hopping over each other caused him to make some kind of unnatural moves, and he got punished for having his king in the center. Alright guys, that concludes episode 2 of Patzer's Playground.